Good morning, everyone. So, for the worship exhortation, we'll turn our Bibles to the first book of Samuel, chapter 7 and verse 12. The first book of Samuel, chapter 7 and verse 12. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen and called its name Ebenezer. For he said, "Till now the Lord has helped us." In the footnotes, you can see the meaning to the word Ebenezer. Ebenezer means stone of help. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the word Ebenezer. We have sung it right now in the song Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. And Samuel was a prophet to the Israelites, and here he's setting up a stone and he's naming it as Ebenezer. So we'll try to understand a little bit of context to it and why probably Samuel would have named it like that. In the chapter 4 of 1 Samuel, we see that both Israelites and Philistines were facing each other. They were in a battle. And Israelites have lost that battle. In fact, they have lost 4,000 soldiers on the battlefield. The elders of Israel reason, why did we lose this battle? And then they come up with a plan. So the plan was to bring the Ark of Covenant. They send the people and they bring back the Ark of Covenant, thinking that if it was in their midst, it would give them victory. Again, with the Ark of Covenant, they go into the battle. This time, they thought they will be winning the battle. In fact, when the Ark of Covenant had come into the Israelites' battlefield, there was a great shout, so much that the Philistines thought, what is happening there? And they've heard that one of the gods have come, and they knew about the God, whom Israel served, and they were all scared. But to everyone's surprise, Israel had lost that battle. In fact, this time 30,000 soldiers have lost their lives. There was a great slaughter, is what the Bible records it. And from there, some events happened, but after 20 years, we come to chapter 7. After 20 years, in chapter 7, verse 2, from the day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So 20 years have passed, and Israel was in this position. And Samuel tells to Israel that, how long will you be like this? Keep away all your idols and worship the Lord alone. And they make a commitment and they look to the Lord. And after this, right, again a similar situation arises. Again, the Philistines have heard that Israelites have gathered at one place. And now Philistines are again coming to war against Israel. Now it's very fascinating in this context, what events have happened. When the Philistines were coming to war against Israel, the Israelites have heard it. In verse 7 we see, now when the Philistines heard that the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. 20 years have passed, and the fear of the enemy was still in the hearts of Israel, because that was the defeat that has made them very panicked. 20 years, the fear was still there. Now, verse 11, you read in the same chapter, and the men of Israel went out from Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and struck them as far as below Bethkar. Something has tragically happened from verse 7 to verse 11, right? They were, on one side we see they were scared, now they're pursuing the enemy. In between, what we see is God's intervention in their lives. The people who were now scared are pursuing the enemy. So that is what our God also does. When He intervenes in our life, right, when we commit to Him, our God takes away our fear. He did not only take the fear of the enemy, but the enemy itself. That's what, we each one of us have encountered. We all have fear of death. And God has taken away that fear. Even here we see Israelites also doing the same. God has taken away their fear that they had for 20 long years. Not only that, but we also see when the enemy was coming onto them, right, the apt, a logical thing that the people of Israel should be doing was to muster their army and go against the war, not do anything else. They should either go and gather their people or send out for help, call help from some other country. But in fact, what they do in verse 8, we see the people of Israel said to Samuel, "Do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines." Now, they could have done anything, but they turned to God, and God did not disappoint them. Right? If they turned to the Ark of Covenant thinking that it would give them victory, but it did not. But now they turned to the Lord, and the enemy was pressing very closely, and all they did was cry out to the Lord, and God did not disappoint them. It is true of many of us as well. In our desperation, right, we cry out to God, and God does answer our prayers. In Hebrews 4:16, it says, "Let us then with confidence draw near to the grace of God, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Many a times we need help, and God does provide. God does not disappoint his children. Not only that, but we also see that in verse 10, in the middle part, you see, "But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel." All that Israel needed was a timely help, right? They cried to God, they needed help, and that help had to be very immediate. And how God's intervention was there in their life was supernatural. God simply sent, God used his nature to answer their prayer. He sent thunders and a mighty sound that the Philistines were confused. We all need timely help. We come to moments in life and we need that immediate help. That's why Psalmist says in 46:1, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of need." Is that not our God? Is that not your experience this morning? Our God is the one who does not even provide help, but he provides a very timely help. That is who our God is. In chapter 4, verse 1, right, they have gathered in the land of Ebenezer. They were defeated, a great slaughter was done there. And now in chapter 7, after having the great victory, now Samuel is setting up a stone and is calling that place, that stone, as Ebenezer. It means thus far God has helped us. It simply was a reminder to Israel that, what God can do for them. You had a great defeat, but God turned that defeat into victory. So this morning I want you to take few moments, think about this God who is our Ebenezer. He is our help. He turns our fears into courage, and he turns that into victory. He provides time, grace when we need it. He never disappoints us when we approach his throne. Not only that, but many a times we need a very timely help at that very moment. If that has been your experience this morning, may I request you to stand up and say, "God, you are my Ebenezer and I worship you." Language is not a constraint. We come from different places, whatever is comfortable, but giving that glory and worship to God is, what makes God happy. So I would request you all take this few minutes now and worship our God.